The road into town was pale as bone at dawn, the kind of light that made even the oldest boards of the saloon glow soft and silver. Dust rolled low like breath over the earth. A wagon creaked toward the square, its wheels moaning. By the time it stopped near the hitching post, a small crowd had gathered, pulled by the sound the way folk are drawn to a church bell or a storm cloud. She was in the back, curled on the rough planks, wrists tied with a rope rubbed dark from miles of travel. Her dress was no dress at all, just sackcloth torn at the hem, showing the thinness of her ankles. When the teamster jumped down and flung the tailgate open, she didn't move. Only her eyes shifted, slow and wide, and caught the light like a spooked mare. A boy of 8 gripped his father's leg, looking up with the fear only children speak out loud. "Daddy, is she dying?" The man's jaw flexed, the one holding the boy steady. He did not answer. The sheriff stepped forward, his badge glinting, his voice rough as a file. "She was found near the border," he said, "a runaway they reckoned, claimed by no one. The law allowed her to be sold for labor, since she had no papers, no proof of kin. No one asked how far she'd walked. No one asked who tied those ropes or why she wouldn't speak. Offers were muttered. The blacksmith shrugged, said he had no use for a girl too starved to swing a hammer. The saloon man smirked and offered $2 for her, cheap enough to wash dishes, cheaper still if she broke. That was when the tall man stepped forward. He wasn't the sort to draw attention in town, came rarely, spoke less. Broad-shouldered, in a dark coat dusty from the ride in, hat pulled low against the sun. He had the kind of quiet weight that made men step aside without knowing why. His boy's hand was still clutched in his, though now the boy was staring at the girl like she might vanish. "How much?" It wasn't a question, just a low note dropped into the square. The sheriff's brow rose. "You sure about that, Caleb?" "She's skittish. Don't talk. Don't work, far as we know." Caleb didn't answer, only reached into his coat and counted coins into the sheriff's palm. The sound of silver clinking was the only thing that moved the air. The rope was passed over like a leash. The girl flinched when it touched her wrists, though the man holding it didn't yank, didn't jerk. Just let the slack hang loose, waiting. When she finally stepped down from the wagon, her knees buckled, but he didn't grab her. He simply matched her slow pace across the square, the boy trotting at his side, looking back at her every few steps like making sure she hadn't fallen behind. They reached the horse. Caleb swung the boy up into the saddle first, then glanced back. She stared at the ground, refusing to meet his eyes, waiting for the strike that always came. It didn't. "Right," he said simply. It wasn't a command so much as an invitation. She hesitated, then climbed up behind the boy. Her hands, still tied, rested on the worn leather, gripping until her knuckles went white. The ride out of town was quiet, but not empty. The boy turned his head now and then, studying her, but she kept her face turned to the horizon. The rancher didn't speak until the land opened, and the fence lines began, miles of grass under a sky so wide it could swallow every secret. By the time they reached the ranch house, the sun was high, warm on the boards of the porch. A woman came out, wiping her hands on her apron. She was middle-aged, strong-boned, the kind of woman who had birthed babies and buried them too, judging by her eyes. "So this is her," she murmured. She untied the girl's wrists slow, like coaxing a wild animal. The girl didn't bolt, just stood there rubbing the rope marks, staring at the open doorway like it was a trap. "Let's get her washed," the woman said. The girl was led inside, where a tin tub steamed by the stove. She was bathed with gentle, work-worn hands, scrubbed until the dust turned the water gray. When they dressed her in a plain cotton shift, she touched the fabric like it might vanish. Outside, the boy crouched by the doorway, peeking in. "Does she talk?" He whispered to his father. "Not yet." That night, she sat at the table, silent, hands cupped around a bowl of stew. She ate slow, as if unsure there'd be more. The boy watched every movement wide-eyed. Caleb said nothing, just chewed his bread, glancing up now and then. When the lamps were blown out and the crickets took up their song, she lay on a pallet near the fire. Her body was still as stone, but her eyes stayed open long after the others slept, fixed on the rafters above. The next day, she followed the boy into the yard. He showed her the chickens, the dog that barked but didn't bite. She didn't smile, but the lines on her brow softened. Days passed. She began helping the woman with the washing, carrying water from the pump. Her silence became less sharp, less like a shield. One evening, Caleb found her standing near the corral, watching him work the bay horse. He didn't speak, just kept his slow rhythm, brushing the dust from the animal's flank. After a while he held out the brush. She stared, then stepped closer. Their fingers almost touched when she took it. That night a storm rolled in, black as tar and loud enough to shake the shutters. Thunder cracked like gunfire. She woke with a cry strangled in her throat, clutching the dress she'd been given. Caleb was there, sitting in the doorway, hat in his hands. He didn't move closer, just waited. Slowly, her breathing eased. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, then spoke, so quiet the fire almost swallowed it. Anna. It was the first sound of her voice they'd heard. Caleb nodded once, slow, like she'd given him something precious. Sleep, Anna. She lay back down, her face turned toward the embers, and for the first time since she'd been brought, her eyes closed easily. Weeks had passed since the storm, and the ranch seemed to breathe easier. Morning light found Anna outside at the pump, sleeves rolled to the elbow, filling the water bucket with practiced care. The cotton dress no longer hung from her like a stranger's garment, but moved with her steps. When she passed the porch, the boy grinned up at her, his hair still sleep-mussed. She reached down without thinking and brushed it back from his face. Caleb saw it from where he sat saddling the bay. It was not much, just a touch, but it was enough to make something in his chest go quiet, like the sound of a wind dying down. Anna had begun to work in the garden, pulling weeds in the weak spring sun. She hummed sometimes low, tuneless notes, but it was music nonetheless. At supper, she met the boys' chatter with nods, a ghost of a smile. She had not laughed yet, but she was nearer to it every day. Caleb took her riding one cool morning. The boy rode ahead, shouting at meadowlarks, while Caleb showed her how to sit easy in the saddle, how to let the horse feel her weight without fear. When the horse broke into a slow trot, Anna gripped the horn and gasped, then let out a small, startled sound that might have been the beginning of a laugh. "You won't fall," Caleb said quietly. She believed him. Later, by the fire, she spoke haltingly of where she had come from. A cousin had sold her to pay a debt. She had been traded from camp to camp, told she owed work she could never repay. When she tried to run, they caught her. When she tried again, they beat her and left her tied until a trader took her south. Her words were simple, flat, but her hands trembled in her lap. Caleb listened without moving, except once to refill her cup. The boy had fallen asleep on the rug, his head on the dog's side. "No one's coming for you here," he said when she fell silent. Her throat worked, but she said nothing. Spring stretched its fingers across the land. Anna planted seeds with the boy, her skirts catching on the earth. She helped drive calves into the pen. Each small task knit her more tightly into the fabric of the ranch. The townsfolk, at first wary, began to nod when they passed her on the road. Then one afternoon the sheriff rode out, dust rising behind him like a warning. Caleb was mending a gate when he dismounted. "Her old master's coming," he said grimly. "Has a paper with a seal on it. Claims she's his lawful property." Anna heard from where she stood by the trough. The blood drained from her face. That night she packed a bundle of bread and meant to slip away. But Caleb was on the porch, waiting. "You last 2 nights out there, maybe 3, he said softly. "Better than being dragged back." He rose, slow as ever, and came down the steps. "I'll see to it he doesn't take you." "Why?" she asked, her voice sharp. He didn't answer right away. "Then, because this is your home now." The next day the riders came. 3 of them, dust-caked and sneering, the man in front carrying the paper like a weapon. The boy clung to the doorway, eyes wide. "She's ours," the man spat. "Sold fair and square." Caleb stood in the yard, unarmed but solid as the fence posts behind him. "She's not yours." The man shoved the paper at him. "The sheriff says different. I don't care what's stamped on that page. She's not going back." The air held its breath. One of the riders shifted in his saddle, hand near his belt. But Caleb didn't flinch, didn't even raise his voice. "If you mean to take her, you'll have to step past me." It was not a threat, just truth laid plain. The man hesitated. The townsfolk had gathered at the fence line, drawn by the noise. The woman who had bathed Anna first stood among them, arms crossed. The blacksmith was there too, his hammer still in his hand. "You'll find no one here to help you," the woman said. Slowly, like a man realizing the world had turned against him, the owner stuffed the paper back into his coat. He swung his horse around with a curse and rode off, his men behind him. Anna's legs gave way then. She sank to her knees in the dust, shaking so hard she couldn't speak. Caleb crouched beside her, not touching, just waiting until she looked up. "It's over," he said. Her breath hitched. She reached for his hand then, not out of fear this time, but as if to anchor herself to the earth. He closed his fingers around hers, warm and steady. That night the house felt lighter. The boy sat at the table and grinned from ear to ear. "So she's staying?" he asked. Caleb looked across the fire at Anna, who was sitting straighter now, her hair loose about her shoulders. "She's home," he said simply. Outside, the prairie wind was soft as a lullaby. Anna went to the doorway and stood looking at the stars, her bare feet on the worn boards. The sky was vast, unbroken, and for the first time in memory, it felt like it belonged to her too. Sometimes a man gives a woman more than shelter, more than a roof, more than bread. Sometimes he gives her back her name, her ground to stand on, her sky to breathe beneath. And Anna, standing there with the quiet house at her back, let out a breath that felt like the first she'd ever taken. If this tale touched your heart, ride along with us for more Wild West stories, subscribe, and join the campfire every week.